Let's move on and now put the spotlight on Lupin. We all remember the stock ran up almost 6% yesterday. This after the company emerged as the first generic player to get a nod for the billion-dollar respiratory drug gSpiriva in the US. Of course, Vivek broke that story. It got confirmed within a couple of hours by the company, and the stock was a big mover yesterday. Nithya Balasubramanian, Director Healthcare at Sanford Bernstein, is with us. Nithya, good morning. Thanks very much for joining in. So we will be, of course, speaking with the management in just a bit as well. But before that, let me ask you, since yesterday, lots of notes have been floating around. I think people are talking about a $100 million opportunity in some cases. This is a big, big drug, right? What are the numbers you are penciling in, and where does it place Lupin's, portfolio with respect to the global market now?
So we do believe that it's a substantial opportunity as well. When we look at the addressable market, we think it's about somewhere in the zip code of $500 to $600 million. Of course, the reported numbers are much higher, but that's at a gross level. But we think at a net level, it's about $500 to $600 million. Lupin, given that it's the only generic, if we were to expect around a 35% price discount, and if they're able to achieve a 35% market share, you are talking about this being an annualized $140 million kind of opportunity. Of course, these assumptions are entirely dependent on how the innovator, Boehringer Ingelheim, reacts as well. We have seen in other markets where the innovator tends to get a little aggressive on pricing themselves, wanting to retain payer formulary coverage. That's something that we will have to wait and watch. But if they are a bit laid back, this is a $100 million plus revenue kind of opportunity for Lupin. And a lot of the margin expansion that the company has been promising will come through from this product, because we do believe it's a high gross margin product and a high EBITDA product for Lupin.
Nithya, do we know of other generic filers for the product, and how that may impact the opportunity for Lupin?
Not yet. I'm not aware of any litigation so far. Anybody who would have filed, you would immediately expect to see some sort of litigation with BI. We haven't seen any. If you look at globally, Teva, Cipla, Hikma, Mylan, these are the companies that normally invest in most of the large respiratory opportunities. I think Mylan has said explicitly that they're not going after Spiriva. Hikma has disclosed something more advanced in the pipeline, and it's not Spiriva. So Teva and Cipla are the two contenders possibly, but neither have disclosed their file in the pipeline or the current status of the product.
Got that. Nithya, but the other question that comes to mind immediately is how much of this has already been in the price? I mean, the market was waiting for the approval on Spiriva for a long time, and we'll put up a one-year chart on the stock, right? We're talking about 35-40% of a rally already. Is it baked in to an extent? And if that's the case, do we start looking forward to some other drug in the pipeline? What's your call?
See, I think that's what we have been saying, that Spiriva has been in the price. I think all of us have been expecting it. Of course, there must have been some divergence in terms of exactly when they would get the approval. But I would imagine most of us in the sell side have baked in Spiriva in the numbers in FY24 and definitely in FY25. So I don't really see meaningful earnings upgrades happening because of the news that broke yesterday. I think the play on Spiriva was actually the multiple. I think the argument that we used to hear from investors was it's in the numbers, but it's not really in the multiple. And that we think happened yesterday when the stock ran up 6% or so. If you look at the multiples currently, Lupin is actually trading at 23x one-year forward PE. At these levels, it's actually slightly higher than Sun Pharma. Right? And that, to me, is an indication that even the multiple expansion has actually come through. It's in the numbers now. For further expansion to happen from here on, it has to be other products and other strategy that delivers.
Got it. Nithya, now the pharma space is the one large space, perhaps, along with IT services, which still is not down in the dumps, but it's not at highs at least. It's far off those levels. What's the kind of mood out there? Do institutional investors want to look at this space? We have a recent new listing, Mankind Pharma, which has done so well since listing. I think from listing, it's up some 45% or so, maybe a little more. What would you recommend to investors in this space now?
See, I think in general, names that have higher domestic exposure do find favor. So if you look at the last quarter as well, Mankind, Torrent, JB Chemicals, the ones that have 60, 65, 70% plus kind of exposure to domestic India business are the ones that did well. And that interest remains. In the US space, though, I think there is a little bit of warming up that I'm seeing to companies exposed to the US space, because tactically we do see the prices recovering compared to last year, and therefore there is maybe a tactical play here. Names like Aurobindo and maybe even a Lupin. So Lupin also does about $700 million in the US. Dr. Reddy's, I would imagine these three names, which have substantially large US portfolios, will probably see a little bit of recovery compared to last year in the US generics portfolio. But honestly, that still remains a tactical bet, right? We are not yet seeing a structural reason as to why the US generic market is becoming more attractive. And that's kind of the reason why, if you look at broadly the sector, it's still trading at long-term averages. I think going forward from here, as I said, these US exposed names, I think in the next couple of quarters is likely to find some favor.
Got it. But for Lupin, Aurobindo, Dr. Reddy's, for a tactical kind of play, this would be a good time to buy? I mean, you'd make some money from here?
Dr. Reddy's, yes, I think after the last quarter, it actually corrected quite substantially. I think about 7 or 8% it was down after the last quarter. Dr. Reddy's and Aurobindo as well. So Aurobindo actually has one of the wider portfolios. So any small disruptions that are happening in the market, given their flex capacities and portfolio, they're probably more likely to benefit.
You don't cover Piramal Pharma, Nithya, do you? That's another one where there is a fair bit of conversation. Got it. All right. Thank you very much, Nithya. Appreciate you joining in, and it's a pleasure speaking with you here on CNBC-TV18. By the way, just to circle back to Lupin, we have Ramesh Swaminathan, Executive Director at Lupin, joining us at 9:30 this morning with, of course, what the company themselves makes of the opportunity from gSpiriva generic. We'll discuss, of course, that in greater detail. But